Welcome back to another How to Succeed podcast. This is How to Succeed at Influencing People with Brian Ahearn. Brian is at influencepeople.biz is the website. You can also find him on LinkedIn, and it looks like there's a book behind him there too. So we're going to find out all about that and how we can influence people here. The podcast is brought to you by Sandler, the worldwide leader in sales, management, and customer service training with over 200 locations. If you want more information on that, go to Sandler.com. And of course, I'm your host, Mike Montague, head of franchise strategy here at Sandler, and I'm really excited to talk about how to succeed at influencing people. Now, Brian, I have a tough question for you here to start off with influencing people, which is, can we actually do that? I feel like we have a Sandler rule, which is you can't sell anybody anything until they discover that they want it. But I like the rule word influencing more than changing somebody's mind or convincing them or selling them of something. Tell us about what you mean by influence.
Well, Mike, first, thank you for having me on the show. I'm excited to share with you and your audience. Every person, every day, from the time they're born until the time they die, are influencing people. You know, a child comes into the world, they can't say, hey, mom, dad, I'm hungry, feed me. So what do? They cry. But they are trying to get a need met. And through the entirety of our lives, if you really think about how many times you are interacting with people where you may want to change their thinking, how they're feeling, or a lot of the times it's about changing behavior, and how you communicate can make all the difference in the world. And so when I think about influence, and I use the words influence and persuasion interchangeably, I default to Aristotle's definition of persuasion. He said it was the art of getting somebody to do something they wouldn't ordinarily do if you didn't ask. So how we communicate can make a world of difference between people saying yes or no to whatever it is that we're proposing or advising.
All right. I like that. That's a great definition. And I'm glad you were prepared with one. So I gave you my tip on how people mess this up. I think a little bit is coming on too strong or trying to change people's minds. Where do you think people go wrong with their attitude in trying to influence people?
I think the biggest mistake that a lot of salespeople make when they are trying to influence people is they're still very self-focused rather than other-focused. And we get it, right? There's big incentives a lot of times to making a sale. But I think the key starts with liking the other person. And this is one of the principles that we talk about. It's not about me getting you, Mike, to like me. It's about me coming to know and like you. And that once you begin to sense, hey, this guy, Brian, really likes me and cares for me, that is what opens you up to whatever I might offer. But it also changes because the more I get to know and like you, the more I am looking out for your best interests and really trying to help you solve whatever problems you may be facing.
I think that's good. What about behaviorally, though? Is there something at the beginning that people do to mess up, or how would they know if they're coming at it from the wrong attitude?
Well, I think too many people launch right into whatever it is that they're selling rather than taking time to get to know that person. So I'm always advising clients, and anybody who's in the sales game for any period of time knows this. You do your research beforehand so you can find things you can genuinely compliment, things that you can connect on. And that's where you really start. Not just because, again, that it would make you like me. And plenty of studies show that if you find things that you have in common with me, you'll like me more. But it's working on me at the same time. And so therefore, if I find out we grew up in the same hometown or cheer for the same team, or if I find something complimentary and I mention that to you, I'm thinking more highly of you. So it's all working to get me to like you. And that's the attitude shift that I think great salespeople need, is to focus on coming to know and like those that they serve.
Yeah. Now, I also think in the attitude bucket that, I don't know, I feel like there is this sort of moment that is a little like a paradox, that if we try to be more authentic, it makes us less authentic. Or if we try to influence, we make it less likely that we're able to do so. I'm sure you've worked with enough people to coach through that. Whenever we're thinking about our personal presence, I think we can get a little inside our heads and a little meta about it. And you start thinking like, you're driving like when there's a police officer behind you, right? And you're all of a sudden it's like, wait, are my hands at 10 and 2? Is my belt buckled? And we can kind of mess it up. So when we start thinking about changing how we influence each other, do you have any tips on how we should approach that?
Well, when it comes to being authentic, I have found in life that when I've done something that has really benefited somebody and they've come back and said, wow, you remember when you said or did this? And I'm thinking, no, I have no idea. And that probably was most authentic. And I think that we get to authentic when we digest what we call the principles of influence. So I don't look at these principles as techniques or tactics or whatever. They're principles. We can live by principles. And that when you allow those to become a part of who you are, then it's natural when it comes out. And I've had people in the past say like, oh, I know exactly what you were doing there. And literally I'm thinking, I don't know what they're talking about. So I'd say, tell me. And they would talk about how I was using a principle. Well, it was ingrained so much in me that it was just natural to come out. I wasn't having to think about it and concentrate on it. And I think that's where authenticity comes in.
Yeah, let's talk about some of those principles. We use that concept here at Sandler too, of some rules that scripts and things don't work because the other party doesn't have the script. And so rules apply to certain situations, and principles are values that you can live by. That makes it a little bit easier to create curbs on the roadway for yourself, or to be more authentic once you practice that stuff, right?
Absolutely. Again, for me, it starts with that principle of liking, because then all of the other principles can play off of that in a very natural way. And it becomes just part of who you are. So for example, to connect with somebody, you're not doing it just to make a sale, but you're doing it because you also genuinely enjoy meeting people, and you want to enjoy the people that you work with, that are your prospective and current clients, vendors you may deal with. So everything starts with that. That is something that can become deeply ingrained in each of us, to where we are really looking for the best ways to connect with other people.
What are some of the other principles that we should be aware of? And go ahead and jump into them.
So all these principles that I'll mention, everybody will intuitively understand them because they describe human thinking and behavior. So we already know that it's easier for people to say yes to us if they like us, but we come to like them. But the next principle we talk about is reciprocity, right? The natural obligation we feel to give back to people who first give to us. So when you have really come to know and like somebody, your giving becomes more authentic too. It's not me giving you things, Mike, just so you'll do what I want. It's I've come to know and like you, so therefore I do want to do whatever I can to be beneficial and helpful for you. That's where you see me differently too, where you're like, that's really kind what he did. He didn't have to do those things. And so your reciprocity is not, I have to repay the favor. It's a natural, I want to do something. And this is how we form a virtuous relationship, where I'm putting forth the best. That's how you receive it. You repay that. And so we're both continually getting better from that. So that's our second principle. Third principle that we talk about is authority. And everybody understands this. It's easier to follow the lead of an expert. So we encourage people to make sure that their expertise is out in front of them. Now, an authentic way that happens, I can't walk into your office, Mike, and tell you how good I am at what I do. But I can turn to somebody else that it might be someone that we both know and that you trust, and I could ask that person for a third-party introduction. And so when that individual then introduces me and can say glowing things about me, it's very natural. So again, I haven't violated any authenticity because I've just gone that route to get that third party to make that introduction. Another principle that we talk about is social proof. People are inclined to follow the lead of others, and in particular, the people who are most like them. So again, this can go back to liking. The more I've come to know you, the more I find out, what you value, what you believe, what we have in common, all of those things. That's where I can start looking and say, Mike, here are some clients who are very similar to you, and here's how they benefited from the solution that we proposed. And of course, people will naturally look at others like themselves and think, well, if they are benefiting from it, then I stand a good chance of benefiting from this as well. So those are the first four principles. There's two others. You want me to keep going, or do you have any questions?
I did want to jump in on the authority one, because I have some thoughts there, and it's one that is one of my favorite in the Sandler world, because you're right. We can't say how great we are, especially when we're in the position of a salesperson, because they're not going to believe us, right? Of course, you're going to say you're good. Right. And sometimes even in the social proof where you're like, oh, here's a case study or something. You go, well, I'm assuming you're not going to send me the case study where you blew it and cost your client hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? But I think authority is one of those things too that is a little counterintuitive, that Michael Jordan doesn't have to tell anybody how good he was at basketball anymore, right? That is something like a story that beats you there, especially when you do it with a referral. And then also with the way you show up. So instead of saying how great you are, maybe you ask a really great question that makes them think, and they go, oh, this person's done this before, to themselves. And they say that out loud. Wow, you really know what you're doing. That's what you want them to say, not me say, I really know what I'm doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes back to the homework part, where you are really getting to understand that particular individual, that particular business, to the point where you can ask questions, not the ones that the prospective clients looking at you and saying, you could have answered that if you looked at my website, right? Yeah. So it's not just about throwing out questions and feeling good about it. It's about asking questions that cause you to think differently, but show that I've done my research and I know what I'm doing. So that certainly elevates expertise. There's a lot of things that we can do that can show our expertise. It can be as simple as the credentials on your business card. Now, a lot of people might think, well, that's no big deal. People don't pay attention to that. Well, the vast majority of human thinking and behavior occurs at the subconscious. Those things that you think people aren't paying attention to have an impact. And another way to get your expertise in front of somebody is just casually mentioning it. So I came out of the insurance world, and I might be able to say, you know, Mike, I've been doing this now for more than 30 years, and something I've learned along the way that has worked especially well for clients like you. But that little nugget that I dropped out there, I'm not bragging, I'm being truthful. I'm putting that out there because I know it's going to influence your thinking, and I want the best for you. And so I'm trying to show you why what I'm offering is going to benefit you and your organization.
Yeah, I love that. I wanted to highlight that one too, because I mentioned that I don't like case studies, but what I do love is third-party stories where I'm not giving you a presented, polished case study, but I'm telling the story of, oh, you know, I worked with a client 15 years ago, like you said, that was in a similar situation, and this owner had their kid in the business and blah, blah, blah. And now all of a sudden you're establishing that I've been here for 15 years. I've worked with other clients like you in this situation. I've solved this problem before. And you're telling the story of someone else's challenges that allows them to connect and resonate with that. And I think when you can tell your buyer stories, it really increases your authority.
Right. Now, a mistake sometimes salespeople make is probably wanting to impress somebody. But if I have a company that's worked with large organizations and small organizations, and let's say, Mike, you're a small organization, I'm not going to tell you how working with Visa and this is what I did, because you can't relate to that at all. In fact, that would sound like bragging. I want to talk about people and organizations that are similar to yours. So simple thing to do. But again, you know that a lot of people will make a mistake trying to look good by putting forth this big client that's irrelevant to the one you're talking to.
Love that. Now, there were two more that we didn't get to.
Yeah. So the next one that we talk about is commitment and consistency. And this describes the fact that we feel an internal psychological pressure, but also external social pressure to be consistent in what we say and what we do. So when we understand this, one of the first things that we do is we stop telling people what to do and we start asking. Because so often people will say, well, Mike, you know, to finish the quote, I need you to do X, Y, Z. No. I should say, Mike, you know, I want to do the best job possible. In order for me to finish the quote, would you be able to get me your loss runs from the last 3 years? And you say, yeah. And I might say, you know, would you be able to get those by Tuesday? And even if you have to say, no, I've got fallback positions. So I'm very strategically asking these questions that will allow me to get what I need so I can do my best job for you. So stop telling people what to do and start asking. The other thing that we talk about a lot too is the more I've come to know you via the liking principle, then the more I can show you how what I'm offering aligns maybe with what you already believe or what you value, what is important for your business, because it's easier for you to make a decision that's in line with that versus having to make this great big change in order to do business with us.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to jump in. Have you read The Trusted Advisor by Charles Green?
Not by Charles Green. I read Trust Agent is what came to mind. Chris Brogan a number of years ago.
Oh, awesome. I'll have to check that out too. Yeah, this one's been around for at least 15 years or so, but he talks about how you build trust, and part of that is the likability, part of it is the credibility, and then the reliability. But all of that is divided by your self-orientation. How selfish you're being in the situation. And I'm hearing a lot of those same principles from you, and I like that they're laid out in that way, that you're thinking about what is increasing this likability, what's increasing your trust and credibility, and certainly consistency and showing up is one of those things.
Yeah. Well, one other thing, speaking of building trust too, nobody and nothing is perfect. And so for somebody to admit a weakness relatively early gives you credibility. Then you can segue. You can use a transitional word like but or however and segue into your strengths. And most people will get this. If my wife says, honey, I love you, but I know the hammer's coming. I forget the I love you. And we tend to focus on whatever comes after, however, and but. So by honestly talking about, I might even go in and say, Mike, I'll be straight up with you. We are not a low cost provider because we provide high service. And however, and then I begin to talk about those things, I've at least addressed what you might have been thinking about, and I don't want you preoccupied by it. But I've gained trust as somebody who's honest because I'm putting forth what I already know is a weakness.
Yeah, I love that, disarmingly honest. Now, did we get to number 6? I was listening and not counting.
No. So number 6 is the principle of scarcity. People want more of what they can have less of. We tend to be loss averse. And so a simple reframe from positive to gain, from, positive to maybe the negative aspect or what somebody may lose can get a lot more people saying yes. And I will give you a very quick example. University of California performed energy audits, went back to homeowners, shared ideas to make their homes more energy efficient. In one sample, they would tell people, if you do these 5 things, you'll save an average of $180 on your electric bill next year. Of course, everybody likes to save, so that's good. But with the other group, they said, if you don't do the 5 things that we've shared with you today, you'll lose about $180 next year because you're going to overpay on your electric bill. And 150% more people who heard they would lose decided to implement the ideas. It's the same $180, but how we talk about it matters. So we don't want to be scare tactics and, Debbie or Danny Downer, but we honestly look to conversationally reframe something that could be touted as a gain to, well, Mike, here's what you'd be giving up. Some of these competitors are fine competitors, but to my knowledge, none of them does these 3 things. And that's what you'd be giving up. And that kind of thought process really begins to change people's willingness to say yes.
Yeah, we found that a lot here too. And I love it when I have a guest like you on and all the stuff aligns between one another, because sometimes we get in our own world and you start kind of maybe making a photocopy of a photocopy, and having a good new fresh perspective helps a lot on this. But the way we tie that in, I'm also trying to translate it to Sandler speak for our friends listening here.
Sure.
That we do this in 2 ways. You mentioned kind of being disarmingly honest, and we talk about that with a negative reverse. Sometimes taking it away makes people more interested in it. When we push harder and you talk about how great it is, they start to push back and they start to pull back, that they can't trust you. But when you take it away from them, it creates that scarcity. And even just doing it in the negative, like, this might not be a good fit for you. I don't know if we're going to be able to work together on this one, starts them questioning that rather than them looking for reasons to say no to you. Right. And it just kind of flips that script when you're disarmingly honest. And when you create some scarcity, it creates attention with people.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And so when I work with clients, it's teaching them the core of these principles and then looking at what they're already doing and how can we inject these principles into what you're doing so you get more bang for the buck. I don't build sales processes. That's not my strength. There are lots of organizations and individuals who do that, but I could help you make it better by looking strategically about how to apply these principles. Because when I came in contact with them, for me, the light bulb came on and I thought, holy cow, this is the underpinning of all selling. This psychology explains why so many sales approaches work and why so many fail. because it's all about how people think, feel, and behave.
And we've covered a lot of techniques here along the way, but I wanted to give you one more shot at it. If there was a how, a thing to start doing or stop doing, or a tip, trick, or hack you had for us, does anything come to mind?
I will go back to emphasizing the principle of liking, because it is the foundation for me of utilizing all of these other principles in natural and authentic ways. And I think you would agree that selling is a relationship business. It's not going to be a one-time thing. I will hope to have a relationship with you for quite a long time. So I need to get to know you and like you. The good thing is that when you begin to practice this in your business and it begins to spill into your personal life, it's amazing the difference it will make in terms of your ability to meet wonderful people, to extend offer and help, to build your network, and most at the base level, to just enjoy life more.
I love it. Once again, we've been talking with Brian Ahearn. You can find him at influencepeople.biz. And tell us about the book over your shoulder.
Well, I've written 3 books, so it's only on the corner of the screen there. I've got a book called Influence People, which is, I'll call a business psychology book. It's a practical application of the psychology we just spoke about. I wrote a book called Persuasive Selling for Relationship-Driven Insurance Agents. So that looks at taking these principles and how do you apply them all on the sales cycle, from prospecting through referrals. And then the 3rd book I wrote, knowing that some people will never read a sales book or a business psychology, I wrote a business parable to teach these principles. So if somebody likes a story, then this is in a story format.
Good stuff. Now, at this point in your career, how do you define success for yourself?
Happy is the man who wants what he has, or woman wants what she has. I have learned to be content. You know, if business is great, that's wonderful. And if it's slow, that's still okay. I focus on what I have and the positive. I'm going to celebrate my 36th wedding anniversary soon. 28-year-old daughter who's happily married. Love the place that we live. And so I just try to be happy and content with what I have. It doesn't mean I don't strive for other things. I mean, I'm very goal driven and ambitious, but not to the point where I can't just enjoy today.
Nice. And was there a biggest failure, hard lesson learned, or a hurdle you had to get over in your career in order to be successful?
Probably the biggest failure that didn't end up being as big a hurdle as I thought it was, but it sure felt bad. When I worked at the insurance company and I managed the bonus plan, and part of my role was to estimate what we were going to pay at the end of the year. And we get to the end of the year and all the year-end files are imported. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm off by $1.2 million. And had to go to accounting, and they had to open the books and readjust and refile. And so it was a big deal. And you don't feel good when you walk out the door making $1 million mistake. But here's the good thing. The individual who was the head of the sales area at the time, I went up to his office. I took the lead on it. I didn't wait for him to call. I went up as soon as I could and sat down and have a conversation. And he said, you know what? He goes, you're a smart guy, and I don't think it'll ever happen again. Don't worry about it. Now, I also knew that if it had happened again, he would have said, you're not as smart as I thought. You're out the door. But I appreciated that he understood everybody can make mistakes, and he knew that's simply what it was. And it didn't cost the company. We hadn't really lost the money, but we had underestimated what we were going to pay. And so it felt like loss.
Yeah. That's a good one. Those are ones you don't forget very easily.
No.
And they're big ones like that. Last question. Do you have a favorite quote, motto, or mantra you try to remember?
Probably the quote that I defer to the most is, luck is where preparation meets opportunity. And my high school football coach used to say that, obviously, to get us young guys to work out and prepare. And then I learned later in life it was the Roman philosopher Seneca who said it, but it didn't diminish my coach's status in my eyes, because that was over 40 years ago. And I have just always been a firm believer that you do everything you can to get ready for opportunities. And I'll give you a quick example of this, that my wife and I were out one night. We had this great conversation with this young guy who was a sales rep. I talked about what I did. And when we left, she said, I'm so frustrated for you because That's not going to go anywhere. He's just new to the company. And I said, you know what, Jane, it's okay. It was a rep. And the more reps that I have when I am in that situation with the person who can make the decision, I'll be that much better. So I didn't look at it as anything lost. It was opportunity for me to be prepared for the next time.
Great stuff today. Any favorite call to action or ways that you can help us or we can help you as we wind up here?
I would say call to action probably would be, folks who are listening to this, if you connect with me on LinkedIn, first of all, you'll get a personal message back. If you don't put a reason, I'm going to say, how'd you find me? But even if you do, I will personally respond. I post a lot of content. And so if this has been interesting to you, if you're following me on LinkedIn daily, you're going to see something coming out that will help you become more influential.
Well, check him out, Brian Ahearn on LinkedIn, or go to influencepeople.biz and you will find the right one there as well. And if you're looking for more information on, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast wherever you are listening to it or watching it right now. Would be a great start. Share it with somebody that you think needs to hear it, and lots of other great free resources, live events, and books available at Sandler.com to help you. And remember, whatever you are, be a good one. That's what I always say. We'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.